Genesis says God uses the sun, moon, and stars for signs and seasons. Examples can be found throughout the Bible. Think of how a star led the wise men to Jesus, or the sun stood still as Joshua led Israel to victory over its enemies.
When will the earth and the heavens be laid bare and engulfed in a roar and disappear and be replaced with God's new heaven and new earth where righteousness dwells? Now, the Bible gives us clues and pointers about the season in which to expect the return of Christ. Now, the individual Bible signs are clear, but when we try to fit them together in a timeline, it gets confusing. We're left asking, have any of them happened yet? What's the exact sequence? How do we interpret the book of Revelation? Should we count those days in Daniel? Scholars have worked on this. They've taken the scriptures and pieced together detailed timelines. Today, there are perhaps 5 or 6 major ones, all of them based on the Bible, all of them different. So where's a good place for simple believers like us to start?
You know, just about every generation of Christians since Jesus has believed they were living in the end times. So someone might ask you, how do you know that you're living in the end times and you're not just, pretending that you are? Joel chapter 3 is a very important text. And this is God in the first person speaking through the prophet Joel. Here's what he says. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, I will also gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they've scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. And so God here is saying, in the time when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, there's also going to be Armageddon. In the same period of time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem from all over the world, all the nations of the world, there's going to be Armageddon. I'm going to bring all nations down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat means Jehovah has judged, and the valley of Jehoshaphat is the valley between the Mount of Olives and the Temple Mount. And that's where Jesus, according to Zechariah 14, Jesus' feet will touch the Mount of Olives when he returns. So this is the Battle of Armageddon. Israel has been dispossessed twice. Israel is the only nation in the history of the world that has been dispossessed twice and come back to be. So God is saying, you've scattered my people all over the world, but I'm regathering them. That has happened. On May the 14th of 1948, Israel came into existence for the second time. Isaiah 11, God says, I will again for the second time take my hand and regather my people from all the nations. So they've been dispossessed twice. They've come back to life twice. It's unheard of. But on May 14th of 1948, the British mandate ended, and David Ben-Gurion, the leader of Israel, declared their independence. On the same day, President Harry Truman, our president, recognized Israel as a nation. Many other nations followed suit. So literally, in one day, in May of 1948, Israel became a nation. This is Isaiah 66. Who has heard such a thing? Who has seen such things? Shall the earth be made to give birth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion was in labor, she gave birth to her children. The rebirth of Israel on May 14th of 1948 was a fulfillment of the prophecy in Isaiah 66. And so God is saying this, in the same period of time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, May 14th of 1948, in that same period of time, Armageddon is going to happen. Here's what Jesus said, Matthew 24. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, he was talking about the end times, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away. So Jesus says the generation that sees the beginning of the end will see the end of the end. Now, the beginning started, God told us from his perspective, the end started when he brought back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem in 1948. So the last days began. Every generation has had signs of the end times. Every generation's had earthquakes. Every generation's had famines. Every generation's had pestilences. Every generation has some evil person they thought was the Antichrist. But we're the only generation that has the existence of Israel. That's what makes us different. That's why we know we're living in the end time. Israel has to exist for dozens of end times prophecies to come true. For there to be a covenant with the Antichrist in Israel, they have to exist. For the abomination of desolation to take place, they have to exist, and there has to be a rebuilt temple. For the two witnesses to come, there has to be existence of Israel. So Israel has to exist, and they have existed since 1948. So Jesus said, the generation that sees these things will see all things fulfilled. God says, at the same time I bring back Israel, Armageddon's going to happen in that same period of time. So a really important question is, how long is the generation? Jesus said that generation won't pass away. How long is the generation? Well, one of the important things about Bible interpretation is the Bible interprets the Bible. So Psalm chapter 90 says this, the days of a man's life are 70 years, or if by reason of strength, they're 80 years. And I'm 68, I don't like that scripture. I don't like it at all. So the days of a man's life are 70 years, 70 years is a generation, or possibly 80 years. Well, how long has it been since Israel was reborn as a nation? It's been 74 years. They'll celebrate their 74th anniversary this May the 14th, so 74 years. So if a generation's 80 years, we have 6 years left. Now, I'm not setting dates, I'm just telling you what the Bible says. So if a generation's 80 years, we have 6 years left. Now, I'm not setting dates, I'm just telling you what the Bible says.
So the second event on the timeline is the Six-Day War, where Israel captured Jerusalem.
Remember, the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem as belonging to Israel, and we put our embassy there. This is not political, this is just facts. And so the Trump administration recognized Jerusalem, the first world leader since King Cyrus of Persia that recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
There are certain biblical signs that are absolutely undeniable. One of them is that the Jews obtained Jerusalem. 2,000 years earlier, Jesus had prophesied that the Jews would get Jerusalem in the last days. And after 2,000 years without a homeland, they got it back in 1967. Jesus said way back 2,000 years ago that the Jews would get Jerusalem back. That's undeniable.
The third item on our timeline is the Supreme Court ruling of the United States deciding in favor of gay marriage. Gay marriage is something that caused Sodom and Gomorrah and 3 other cities to be destroyed by brimstone and fire. God doesn't like it.
Now, let's just go back in time. There was an event that took place back in the late 40s known as the Babylon Working Ritual. Now, this was a ritual that was carried out by Jack Parsons, JPL. You know, people will even to this day say that JPL stands for Jack Parsons Laboratories, but on paper it's Jet Propulsion Laboratories. JPL is major. It's a historic, so much surrounding this, so much history here. Jack Parsons was not professionally trained, yet he was tapping into high technology and building rockets. How do you do that without any type of formal training? There were no rocket programs in America before Jack Parsons. This is paramount to understand. Babylon Working was successful according to Jack Parsons. Matter of fact, Parsons said in his Antichrist Manifesto that they were successful and that a child was conceived in that act, and that there was a spirit known as Hilarion. The Whore of Babylon was what they were trying to bring about. They believed what we believe, and that America was the final Babylon. Like, this was the revived Babylon. They believed it, and they were occultists. You know, we're Christians, and we believe it. There's evidence to back this up.
Now picture John seeing New York City. He looks in the harbor and he sees this, the sculpture of Ishtar, the goddess of Babylon. That is what the Statue of Liberty was christened after. Then he looks in Central Park and he sees this Babylonian statue that matches the book of Daniel. It's easy to think that this is all it would take for John to believe New York City was Babylon the Great.
The United Nations is continually talking about peace and safety, and as we've seen, they've even adopted this beast, one that they say is a guardian for peace and safety. We're also told that this strange-looking statue was inspired by the Aztecs. They were a bloodthirsty culture of human sacrifice, one that filled their religious temples with trophies of human skulls. Archaeologists say thousands of human sacrifices had their still-beating hearts cut out before their heads were severed and added to a monument the size of a basketball court. The Aztecs had nothing to do with peace and security and everything to do with brutality and conquest. Let's now look at the book of Daniel, written 2,500 years ago, as it, with great detail, talks of this beast that will be manifest in the last days. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. The same beast was described in the 2,000-year-old book of Revelation. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. So let's look closely at this multicolored United Nations symbol of peace. It looks like a leopard, its feet look like the feet of a bear, its mouth is like the mouth of a lion, and it has eagle's wings. Is this just some weird coincidence, or is it just another
Sign on our timeline is known as the Great Sign. It's the only sign in the Bible called the Great Sign. It is the Revelation 12 sign. Many people back in 2017 thought for sure this was the rapture sign. Well, it turns out it wasn't.
This is the view of the heavens on September 23rd, 2017 from Jerusalem at sunset. What you see here is what's known as the Revelation 12 sign. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. Mercury, Mars, and Venus join the 9 stars of Leo to form the crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. Jupiter, representing the child, spends 9 months in the body of Virgo before exiting the body in September, symbolizing the 9-month pregnancy.
Key point to remember for later in this video. Jupiter represents the Christian, the male child is the Christian. And Venus, as you'll see later, does represent Jesus Christ, the bright morning star. Keep these in the back of your mind for later on in the video.
She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up, in Greek the word is harpazo, it means rapture, to God and to his throne. The male child is the Christian who is raptured up to God and his throne. Blood moons represent the atonement of Christ. Those who are covered by his blood, the Christians, will not go through the 7-year tribulation. They will be taken out by the rapture. Anyone who is not a believer in Christ at the time of the rapture will go through the 7-year tribulation, the nation of Israel and the rest of the world. The blood moons and sun alternate in the constellation of the Christian, Pisces. The last blood moon of the tetrad is in the constellation of the fishes, Pisces. From the last blood moon to the Revelation 12 sign, it's 726 days. The Revelation 12 sign, which appeared at the end of the Feast of Trumpets on 9/23/2017, is about the rapture of the Christian before the dragon, Satan, by means of the Antichrist and the beast system, can devour him. In Strong's Concordance, the numerical value of the word rapture in Greek, harpazo, is 726. The rapture did not occur in 2017 because the sign is pointing to sometime in the future. In order to warn of an up-and-coming event, signs must appear sometime before the event.
Here's an interesting thing about it, though. When this was written down, John observed it. He wasn't told about it. He observed it. through time as it happened in our lifetime. That's pretty neat. He was watching the skies above our very heads as this sign took place. Next on the timeline is the rapture sign, an unusual event.
What if the rapture is coming and I haven't led a good enough life? I could be left below.
Well, sweetie, don't worry. God wouldn't spring the rapture on us unannounced. He'd send a sign. God wouldn't spring the rapture on us unannounced. He'd send a sign.
Live on like the money. He makes a lot, they say. Spends his days counting in a garage by the motorway. He was born upon the two upon on a Christmas.
You may ask, why is this the rapture sign? Well, I'm glad you asked. For one, the Pleiades is the heavenly sign for the church. Revelations 1, verse 20, from the King James Version. The mystery of the 7 stars, which thou sawest in my right hand, and the 7 golden candlesticks. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. Now, why the moon? Well, the moon is where the elect look for the signs. It's because their calendar is lunar based, and they look for the blood moons and the tetra moons, and the moon is a pointer for them. It tells them the signs. 3, Venus. Venus is known as the bright morning star. This is also the title of Jesus. In this sign, it represents Venus, Jesus, going to the Pleiades, the church, and gathering up his people onto him in his right hand. So to sum this sign up, you have the Pleiades, which is the heavenly sign for the churches. You have the moon, pointing out Venus first, then the Pleiades. 3 days later, Venus eclipses the Pleiades. Now the moon just told the elect, pay attention. This is important. When Venus eclipses the lowest star of the Pleiades, it's as if Jesus is holding the 7 churches in his right hand. This is the gathering up onto Jesus, I believe. And the moon is so the elect know that the church age is done and it is now their time. You won't find these 3 combined ever again or ever in the past. It only happens because Venus retrogrades in the exact spot that it has to for this to happen. Here we have in 2028, the moon eclipses Venus. Okay, the moon is a very significant part of this sign. It is also often used by the elect. The Israelites use the moon for their signs. So here again you see the moon is eclipsed Venus on the 29th of March in 2028. The very next day, the moon eclipses the Pleiades, dead center. And you'll see when I play this out for you, you'll see the moon actually rise up in order to eclipse the Pleiades perfectly. Okay, so you have the 29th of March, the moon eclipses Venus. The 30th of March, the moon eclipses the Pleiades. 3 days later, Venus eclipses the bottom star of the Pleiades. It's not just in the constellation, it's eclipsing a star. I believe this is the rapture sign. Now we'll watch it in action. You'll see Venus here on the right, the Pleiades on the left, and the date counter on the bottom. Now watch as the moon comes in. It's going to eclipse Venus right there, rise up and eclipse the Pleiades. You saw it curve up for the Pleiades. Now we're going to back it up and you can see it. It'll dip back down here and get Venus. Isn't that something? Again, forward and watch the moon eclipse Venus and then rise up to eclipse the Pleiades. Dead center. So, the pointer is the moon, it's pointing at Venus, and then the Pleiades. 3 days later, Venus eclipses that lower star, and Venus, the bright morning star, is holding the 7 stars of the Pleiades in its right hand. Again, this, I believe, is the rapture sign. Now here's something else. Speaking of the 7 churches and the 7 stars represent the 7 churches, they have a similar shape. And I played Connect the Dots, and I got this kind of a question mark looking thing in both formations, and I didn't know what that meant. Then all of a sudden it was revealed to me that that wasn't a question mark, it was a shepherd's staff. And that really makes sense. The shepherd's staff is what the 7 stars of the 7 churches are representing, and the layout of the 7 churches match up as a shepherd's staff for the Lord Jesus, who is our shepherd. Now let's take a look at the Hebrew date that the rapture sign takes place on. You'll find this interesting. Nisan is the New Year's month. It's the first month of the year for the Hebrew calendar. 7 being the end of the very first week of the year. Okay, so 7 is completion. That's what 7 means. And it's the completion of week 1 of the new year, 5788. Let's take a look at what 5788 means. First, we're going to have 5 equals grace. Okay, then of course we have 7 again. It's completion. What does that mean? Grace completed. That's the end of the grace period. Then we have 2 8s. 2 8s mean new beginning. Why are there 2 new beginnings? Well, first off, we have the church. Church is going to heaven, and it's going to heaven through the rapture. And it's going to marry Jesus and become the bride of the Lamb of the world. Next, we have the new beginning for the elect. Now, the elect are the Israelites, and they failed to see their Messiah the first time he came. So there's a punishment here for them, that they have to go through the 7-year tribulation period, the worst period of time in Earth's history, because of the horrible mistake. Next, if you take a look at the amount of time between the rapture sign that we observe in the heavens and the end of the generation that has been dictated by the state of Israel becoming a nation. Okay, there is exactly 40 days and 40 nights between the two. That, my friend, is a biblical number. That's another sign that we're right. 40 days and 40 nights, that's incredible. What are the odds of something like that? So there's a window of 40 days. No man knows the day or the hour. It could happen anywhere in between there, if we're right. Remember, these dates are set by the date that Israel became a nation.
And now for something completely different.
Now you may be wondering why I keep calling it an 80-year generation. Psalms 90 verse 10 clearly points this out. Let me show you. The days of our years are 60 years and 10. That would be 70. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years, that's 80, yet is their strength labor in sorrow, for it is soon cut off. Okay, as a generation that's being cut off before its time. Okay, they're going to cut off. The rapture is going to happen before the end of the 80 years. And we fly away. How else can you describe the rapture? This is clear. There's no doubt whatsoever what this verse means. And that's what I'm talking about.
So it says that the boat landed on the 17th day of Nisan. That's the same date that Jesus walked out of the tomb. It was on the 17th of Nisan. Calendar dates are very important to God, and also numbers. In fact, he's got an entire book called Numbers. And also symbols. God has symbols, and the occult has symbols. Choose this day who you serve. But Nisan 17, 7 and 1 of course is 8, that's the number of new beginnings. On Nisan 17th, and that's the date on the Hebrew calendar, that's when the ark, God goes out of his way to tell you that the ark hit ground on Nisan 17. The day they walked through the Red Sea, that the Red Sea parted, and they went through the waters of the Red Sea. They passed through the abyss, or death, to the other side of death. Was on Nisan 17. And the day Jesus came out of the tomb, the new beginning, was also on Nisan 17.
Here's an interesting coincidence. Nisan 17 falls between the rapture sign in the heavens and the end of the generation. It's very interesting. No man knows the day or the hour. It could be Nisan 17, it might not be.
Then the next thing on the timeline is, of course, the next day. It's the start of the tribulation generation. And we'll see where this takes us. The first major event that we can see taking place in the tribulation years would be the prophecy of Wormwood.
And yet we have another coincidence on this timeline. Nisan 17, which could be the rapture date, it takes place 10 days after the rapture sign in heaven and exactly 1 month before the end of the generation. Now, if you take a look at Nisan 17 and you add exactly 1 year to it, you'll find the date 4/13/2029. And we have a significant event taking place on that day. And that would be the Apophis flyby, where it flies so close to Earth that it's actually inside our GPS satellite network. It's expected to take out a few satellites as it goes through next to our atmosphere. The slightest change could spell doom. Let's take a look at it.
You had another sealed instruction. It was sheer Bible prophecy from Revelation 8.
Yeah, so this one was the most terrifying experience I've ever personally had, which kind of conflicts with me because you know me, Sid, I like to be positive, I like to talk about positive things, I like to be filled with hope. So approximately 1 year ago now, went to bed, same scenario, 2 a.m. in the morning, and all of a sudden, I woke up into this panoramic, almost like a film that's playing out in front of me, and I'm in the middle of it. And what I first thought I was looking at was a giant fiery dragon. Deep up in space, moving, undulating like a serpent, racing towards the Earth. Then suddenly my point of view changed, and now I was up above the object, and I could see that it was not a fiery dragon, but rather it was a giant space rock, an asteroid. And the way it was turning as it was moving through the space and the light of the sun was glistening off of the elements of the stone. It only gave it the appearance that it was moving back and forth. Now, all of a sudden, I'm back on Earth again. And now I am surrounded by literally tens of thousands of people, and we are on a mountain. And we are running for our lives. And people everywhere are screaming and begging God to deliver them from what is coming. And I turn and I look over my shoulder, and I can see this fiery mountain, basically, this giant rock entering into the atmosphere, burning as it comes through the atmosphere, breaking apart as it comes through the atmosphere. A huge part of it strikes the ocean, a huge part of it strikes the earth, and all of a sudden, the earth is shaking so violently that none of us can stand up. We're all knocked off of our feet. It was the most horrific thing. I can hear this terrible sound as if the earth is literally cracking, like the mantle of the earth is breaking apart. And now I'm looking back over my shoulder again, in this giant wall of water, just an enormous tsunami, hundreds of feet tall, coming up over the top of this mountain. And again, everybody's trying to run. Then these, what felt like large hands, come down underneath my arms and lift me up into space, and now I'm looking down upon the earth. And here's an important part about this entire thing. I'm not a scientist. I don't know what would happen if an asteroid of that size were to impact the earth. But what I saw, I later found to be exactly how scientists describe what would transpire. With the waters boiling beneath this giant burning rock, the aerosol coming up off of that, entering into the upper atmosphere, setting in motion hurricane activity, the second part hitting the earth. As this is playing out, I'm terrified. All of a sudden I wake up and said, I almost fell out of bed on my face. I mean, I had cold chills all over me. I'd never seen anything this vivid or terrifying. I start writing it down, but then all of a sudden, it was as if a voice. I don't know if this was just in my head or if it was an audible sound in the room, but it was as if a voice spoke, and it said one word, Apophis. So because what I saw was literally a space rock, when I got out of bed, I immediately went and started doing research. One thing led to the other, and learned that this asteroid at first was on NASA's radar as being an NEO, a near-Earth object, that they believed it in 2004 had the potential to impact the Earth. The bottom line is Apophis is a real asteroid. In April of 2029, Apophis is going to strike the Earth.
In 2004, astronomers discovered a dangerous asteroid lurking in space, whose collision could cause as much damage to Earth as done by the Chicxulub impactor, wiping out the entire population of non-avian dinosaurs some 66 million years ago. Initially designated 2004 MN4, this 340-meter wide rock at 170 million kilometers from Earth didn't seem very interesting. But soon, the analysis suggested that it had a 1 in 37 probability of hitting the Earth in 2029. That's the highest probability ever calculated for a substantial asteroid strike recorded in history. The rock was regarded as the most dangerous asteroid discovered so far. It scared people, and the asteroid was soon named Apophis, after the Egyptian demon of chaos and destruction.
I'd like you to take a look at something really fantastic. The start of the tribulation generation date, and then I put in the start of the solar eclipse that is over Jerusalem. And it turns out that solar eclipse takes place exactly 3.5 years after the start of the tribulation generation. So it would appear my dates so far are lining up perfectly for there to be a solar eclipse over the abomination that causes desolation. On the exact day the abomination that causes desolation takes place. And that solar eclipse, as you can see here, is coming out of Libra, the justice scales. Libra is also known as the throne room of God. How much more biblical can it be to have a solar eclipse, an evil omen, a troubled omen coming down on Jerusalem 3.5 years to the day after the tribulation starts, where the abomination that causes desolation takes place? And here it is, exact proof that that is exactly 3.5 years to the day from the start of the tribulation generation. Another to the day match. You can't deny it. Now, if you're still with me, we're going to talk about the final sign in the timeline. That is the Star of Bethlehem in Aries, the Lamb of the world. It taking place as Venus slowly approaches Jupiter. Now remember what I told you earlier. Jupiter represents the Christians that were born from Virgo, and the bright morning star represents Jesus. Jesus and the Christians come together for the millennial reign. This conjunction also has a different name that's more commonly used. It's called the Star of Bethlehem. And that takes place in Aries, the Lamb of the world. Can you think of a better sign for the start of the millennial reign? Is Jesus coming and meeting and connecting with the Christians, Jupiter. Thank you very much for watching the video. There's too much here to overlook. Please share it.